Roswitha Firth, and thank you for joining today's podcast with KingsBridgeBCP.com. With me today is Daniel Tschopp, and he's graciously agreed to talk to me today about some business continuity challenges that he and his organization have recently faced. And we hope that you guys have some great takeaways and lessons learned that you can use in your own business continuity planning going forward. So thanks again for joining us. Hi, Daniel.
Good morning, Roswitha. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
As you mentioned, Daniel Tschopp is my name, and I am the head of enterprise risk management here at Logix Federal Credit Union, located in Valencia, California, which is a bit north of Los Angeles. I've been in this position for about a little over 4 years now, and I'm enjoying multiple aspects of the various activities that we have in our division reporting to me, starting obviously with risk mitigation type of activities such as internal audit, BSA, AML compliance. We also do collections activities. We do insurance for our credit union. And of course, we do also business continuity. And that is near and dear to my heart. And that is also one of the reasons that Skip and I started talking about talking a little bit about business continuity here at Logix. We have had a relationship with Kingsbridge for several years now. And obviously, I should say it's almost turned into a friendship by now.
That's always nice to hear. Always nice to hear. Well, thanks again for joining me today for this conversation. So I guess, because I don't know all of your background, I am curious, in any of your prior roles before joining the credit union, did you ever have responsibility or participation in business continuity?
The answer would be no. This was something relatively new to me. And to be honest, when I took over or formed the division, I should say, including business continuity, I needed a bit of a crash course, and Skip and Tam definitely filled in that gap together with Eileen Foster, who's my VP of Risk Management Operations. And I was very grateful for that, because it's not something that comes naturally. It's a task that you have to theorize a little bit. You have to think abstract a bit. You have to think about things that you don't think about most of the times. And that is the one thing that makes it interesting, makes it intriguing. But I have to admit, it also makes it a bit difficult sometimes to sell to my colleagues, because they don't think of these scenarios all the time. And when they actually happen, it's typically too late to start planning then. You actually need to plan before that.
Very, very, very true. So I know that Kingsbridge and Logix have had a relationship for several years. Can you tell me about how long has Logix had a business continuity plan of some kind?
It would go back probably to the early 2010s. It was before my time, before I actually joined Logix, and again, my colleague Eileen Foster did a lot of groundwork and got her feet wet in BCP. All things looking for a vendor, looking for a system, trying to spread the gospel, which can be a bit of a culture change also, because the company has to not only understand but also embrace the fact that we are planning for certain events and we are training for these events. Tabletops obviously come to mind.
Yeah.
And therefore, I would say overall, it's probably close to about 10 years that we had this now, and it has matured along the way, of course. Some input we were able to provide, and a lot of input obviously coming from Kingsbridge. We are very happy now with that platform called Shield. And now I'm not so sure if I should mention Shield at all. Actually,
you absolutely can. I'm gonna, if you If you don't want to because you don't want to get
No,
that.
I'm fine. It's just,
Okay, that's fine.
I didn't know if that was something.
Yeah, no, it's totally good. And we're super happy for the endorsement. It wasn't anything we were looking for in this conversation, but we're super happy for it. So,
okay.
But yeah, no problem at all.
Good.
So yeah, no, that's great. And let me go ahead.
Then I'll definitely continue on that.
Okay.
That platform has actually allowed us to get a very nice visibility, and just to give you an example here of where our employees live and how prone they would be to one of the scenarios that we test for every year. It's power outages. In our area, we are unfortunately plagued with wildfires, and wildfires typically trigger power shutdowns. Also, power outages could happen because of the excessive heat and people using their air conditioning a little too much. Therefore, that is one of the more realistic, even maybe the most realistic scenario for our environment. And therefore, having the platform showing us which areas and employees living there are at risk has helped us tremendously in planning for that by deploying certain devices to close by branches, to also implement a system of a warning when utilities announce these power shutdowns, and therefore the ability to then alert our employees and trigger the alternative plans. So all in all, that was a very mutual pollination type of relationship that we had with Kingsbridge over the years.
Good. Take all of that and kind of shift to where were you guys at? Like, how were you positioned with your planning at the start of the pandemic, when things kind of first started getting into the news enough to where Logix said, we need to talk about this. We need to think about what happens if this reaches us. How were you guys positioned to address some of those challenges? And then I'll give you a heads up on the next question after that, just so that you know where I'm going with this is, so what were some of the things that you felt like you anticipated? And then perhaps what were some of the things that came as a surprise?
Of course. To your first question, where were we just at the advent of the pandemic? Well, we had a plan, of course. But let's face it, a pandemic is, and I'm a risk manager, I know how the probability of these events is a once in 100-year event. It's not the event that you plan for on a regular basis. It's one of these events that is on the back of your mind maybe a few times, but then all of a sudden when it happens, it will really, really still take you by surprise. And we were at that moment where, what do we need to do? What do we need to, and we started looking obviously at our pandemic plan. We had one, but was it really addressing all the issues that you had to face? And I'm talking, very micromanagement type of things. The guidance really started to come in and we had to react very fast. The thing is, everything happens at the same time. And that's also true for a pandemic. All of a sudden, the cases start skyrocketing. You have to start to provide an environment that you haven't really tested for before. You have to really almost be ahead of the curve of your competitors to secure devices in order to be able to deploy a remote workforce. You have to make sure that your environment is stable enough to support remote workforce. You have to set all the boundaries and create policies and procedures and expectations, communication forms, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the list goes on and on. Can you prepare for all that? No, you can't.
So
You have a
tell
plan.
me. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you have a plan, and you may even have tested it in a form of a tabletop, but it's all in theory. When practice hits, it's a different story.
Absolutely. So question then, and I know you were in the process of building a new headquarters during this time period. What were some of the things that you feel really worked for how you kind of addressed some of those challenges at the beginning of the pandemic or throughout the pandemic, not just the beginning? Because you had a unique challenge with building a new headquarters while all this was going on.
Absolutely. So I guess what really worked is the fact that our old headquarters, if I may call it that way, is ours. And we weren't on a lease. We weren't about to be kicked out. So we were the masters of our own timeline. That worked really well. And with that, needless to say, the completion of the new headquarters obviously took much longer. The pandemic slowed everything down, and for various reasons. Of course, we all know, shortage in labor was one, but then shortage of supplies as well. So what also worked in our favor is an immediate creation of a task force consisting of multiple representatives throughout the company. Almost all different activities in the company were well represented and were able to contribute to our responses in the various areas. One important one obviously was HR, but again, let's not forget the branches. They had to stay open and they had to deal with members. When I say had to, the pandemic is still not over, but obviously that front has certainly cleared itself up quite a bit. We had to procure a lot of electronics, from laptops to audio systems. We had to move people off site within a relatively short amount of time. Think a whole call center. I mean, these are quite a lot of people. And if you ask me 2 years prior to the pandemic, can we ever have these folks work remotely? I would have said, no, that's not going to happen. Well, guess what? It had to happen, and it did. Over the course of about 2 months, we're able to secure a lot of laptops and other devices, work-related devices, and we're able to set up all these policies, which I think was a success story in itself. So by 2 months into the pandemic, we were almost entirely remote.
Wow.
Whoever came into the office, these were activities that were dependent on location, where specific machinery maybe was at a specific place and had to be managed that way. But 98% probably of the company were working remote already at that point.
Impressive. So or give me an example of a particular challenge that Logix faced as a result of not necessarily specifically the move to a new headquarters, but just simply dealing with the challenges by this long-running pandemic.
Well, one challenge, Logix is big in culture. We're really proud of a culture of inclusiveness, almost family style type of culture, which you'll hear a lot from credit unions specifically. That culture has obviously deteriorated, and it hadn't just to do with the fact that we had remote environment where you don't really see each other except on camera. It's not the same. But also, we grew still through the pandemic. We had some of our best years ever in terms of our financials, and we hired people in a pandemic environment. That proved to be a real challenge, because how, first of all, do you onboard somebody in a remote environment? And second, how do you infuse culture into these folks? So that, I would say, was and remains one of the biggest challenges. How do you preserve a culture and basically make sure that the next generation of hires brings it forward again.
Forward, yeah.
That is something that we're probably going to address over the next few years. We also have departures, of course. Departures due to folks who decided, well, it's not worth going back to an environment in a pandemic situation, or even after the pandemic situation. They just felt like maybe they want to retire, or maybe the new commute is not so much their thing. And obviously we had to replace these folks as well. Currently the market for labor is very tight, and therefore that is another big challenge per se. What wasn't so much a challenge was the actual work remotely. We found that productivity and just the discipline was higher than you would expect. It was true that people worked longer hours. They produced more. And again, it was 2 very successful years, 2020 and 2021. Some people even say that people work more when they're home, and the risk for burnout is a little higher because you can't really separate home from work so easily anymore.
Yeah, I know that can be a challenge. So you touched on something in your response, which was you've moved back into the office. So did you make the decision to bring everyone back 100%, or do a number of days in and out of the office, or bring certain teams in? How did you guys decide to structure that process? Because you mentioned that there were some people that chose to leave because they apparently didn't want to come back in the office.
Yes, we're not the only one facing that.
Of course not.
The labor market has changed. The expectations have certainly changed. Just going back to work fully as pre-pandemic is just not in the cards anymore for a lot of workers, for employees. They would not go along with that. So what we did is we decided to offer a hybrid work schedule, meaning 3 days in the office, up to 2 days at home. So it's 5 days if you want it, but a minimum of 3 days.
Okay.
And that seems to be kind of where the industry is going as well. Hybrid seems to be not just for cars, but also for work environments, the answer right now. I understand that certain companies have made a statement that they want the full workforce back in the office full time. But you can already tell that they're having massive issues recruiting or maintaining, retaining their employees. Because again, the expectations have shifted. People want to have that flexibility. They got used to it. I mean, it's been 2.5 years. Let's face it. You get used to certain things, especially if they help you maintain a certain work-life balance in an easier way.
How long has your workforce been on this hybrid schedule?
We actually implemented the hybrid working model in February of 2022. It's been in place now for a few months. Again, for some people, they would have loved a little more flexibility. But then, where exactly do you draw the line in the sand? It's always the big question. And we've drawn it at 3 days in the office. Again, some people may not be okay with that. They may leave, and they have. But for the most part, I guess our workforce has embraced it and is coming back and is actually enjoying parts of it even. We have a wonderful new headquarters and with a campus where people really can spend some quality time when they maybe take a break. We now have a cafeteria, which we didn't have before. So this offers quite a lot of a nice environment to work in, and some people are fed up staying at home. It's true that
Yes.
Not everybody has a nice home office. Some people really have an environment that doesn't exactly support home working that much, and we have a few of these as well.
Well, it sounds like the decision to come back, 3 days a week minimum in the office has sort of stabilized, and everybody sort of has adjusted to that.
Yes, for the most part, yes.
Do you see this being a long-term, this is going to be sort of the permanent, here's how we do business model for Logix?
Yes, I actually do. And the reason being, as I mentioned earlier, I think that the expectations overall have shifted, and not just in our workforce, but in general. If you look at job postings these days, quite a lot of them will either offer remote or extensive remote ability to work. Others will point out to a hybrid schedule. There's virtually no job posting that will say, it's going to be a full on-site job, unless, you have certain specialty jobs, or you may have, a very senior executive position where more presence may be needed. So overall, absolutely, I think hybrid solution, whatever it's called, is probably here to stay.
So, and it sounds like all of that is working generally very well at this point, and you're fully in the new headquarters. Did you experience any challenges with that transition from everyone working remote to the hybrid schedule that is working well now? Obviously, you did have some retention issues, which everybody, I think, did. Did you have other issues in this transition phase?
Yes, we obviously did. And this is a very human aspect. It's getting used to something and then having to change again is never easy. We are human beings, and therefore we have a certain inertia that prevents us from embracing change. And I generalize, of course, there are exceptions to that. But the fact is that it was, quite some convincing that we had to do in our messages and in our town hall meetings, etc. That this is a good thing. Coming back to the office is what we should be doing. It has to do again with a brand new headquarters that is really fascinating to experience. It has to do with human interaction, face to face, and it has to do with culture, where we all felt that the pandemic kind of held us back. We weren't able to socialize anymore. Gatherings, either company sponsored or outside of the work environment, that we still do that. We get together sometimes, colleagues after hours. We're just not okay, and we'd like to get back to that, obviously. And we found that we have had more pushback and resistance to that coming back to the office than we had anticipated. Originally, we were thinking that everybody would be super excited, but in reality, we had more resistance than planned.
Well, it sounds like everything has turned out well in the end, which is great.
Yes.
I want to thank you, Daniel, for taking the time to talk to me today. This has been a really interesting conversation. I hope that our audience has enjoyed this as well, and some useful takeaways. Go to our website, KingsBridgeBCP.com, for more information on all things business continuity. And we hope you will check out our other podcasts wherever you subscribe to them. We drop a new one about every 2 weeks. And thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Daniel. You have a great day.
You do the same. Thank you, Roswitha.
Thank you.